And then one second for Facebook and Zoom to talk to each other. All right, should be good.
Okay, so hello everybody officially. My name is Alejandro Gomez Guillen and I serve as the artistic director and conductor of Bloomington Symphony. And we're happy to welcome you here to this informal panel discussion here with great speakers, great voices that are going to just help us discuss some important issues. So today we have with us Shenika Jordan, who is, among many things, the road manager for the African American Choral Ensemble, related also to the African American Arts Institute and the Neil Marshall Black Cultural Center. Also a first-year doctoral student at Jacob School of Music at Indiana University. Thank you for being here, Shenika. We also have Jamal Cardine Jr., who is a PhD student also at Indiana University in the Department of Folklore and Ethnomusicology. We have also Dr. Dawn Norfleet, wonderful composer, flutist, pedagogue, singer, musician extraordinaire, who incidentally also was featured in one of BSO's programs before the pandemic. And we will be moderated by one of the members of our orchestra, Kennedi Johnson, who is herself also a graduate student at Indiana University in the Department of Folklore and Ethnomusicology and the Department of African American and African Diaspora Studies. I will sort of take part also where I'm needed, but by all means, this is just a space for all of us to share. And if there are any questions at the end, please save them. And also, you could use the chat feature on Zoom or even on Facebook chat as well. So welcome everybody, and Kennedi, I'll turn it over to you and just be as helpful as I can during the proceedings. So thank you everybody.
And we lost Kennedi.
I think we have her there, but I don't know if she heard the last. Kennedi, are you there? Can you hear me?
Sorry, 1 second.
Feel free to take off your image.
Hi guys. Can you all hear me? Is this fine?
Yes. Yeah, we hear
you guys can hear me. Okay, cool. Sorry, I'm dialing in from Ohio. I drove to Pennsylvania 2 days ago, and so I'm at a rest stop and I'm trying to make all the data things work. But I'm really excited to talk about Florence Price with you all today. I feel like it's going to be a fun discussion. I think the first question I would like to ask you all is, how did you come to classical music? I believe Andre also has a background in classical music too, going to Oberlin. If you all could speak on that at all, starting with Shenika.
Sure. Well, first off, it's really great to be here. Thank you for inviting me. Classical music. So originally I'm from New York City, particularly Brooklyn, New York. And my parents are of West Indian descent. So they came here from St. Vincent and Trinidad and Tobago. So I've been fortunate and grateful to be enriched in so many different cultures growing up. But in terms of classical music, I was not privy to the art form until high school. I went to a performing arts high school, and that's where I basically discovered Beethoven, Brahms, all of the what we call the canon. And I was also very fortunate to have mentors during that time period that introduced me to the art songs composed by Black composers. And so, yeah, classical music for me came a little later. And nevertheless, I'm very grateful because of the wide range of exposure I had to the art form.
Oh my goodness. Okay, now you can hear me. So yeah, I'm curious to hear from Don next, especially as a flutist.
Okay, well, yes, let's see. Classical music. Well, I grew up in Inglewood, California, and at the time it was a predominantly black suburb of LA. And my mother taught choir at a Watts High School, and actually brought an opera there. And it was Giancarlo Menotti's Amal and the Night Visitors. And my brother, who was then 9, played Amal. So, so I grew up with an exposure to choral music in general, classical choral music. Let's see, I would say, since I'd say my first language is probably more like funk and then jazz, um, I didn't have a personal connection to it until I was in college, actually. Because in high school I was in jazz bands and choir and chamber singers and stuff like that. Um, so let's see. So I became a music major and got exposed to different kinds of music. But what really grasped me was Italian Baroque. I'm a huge fan of polyphony and counterpoint. So, um, and then another thing that intrigued me was the new music movement, and um, trying to make something coherent out of bleeps and blops and things like that. And it took me a while to get my own language so that I don't feel like I have to be like one way or another, that I can just kind of be fluid between um, different mm, different aspects of genres and just kind of create my own language, my musical language.
Thank you. How about Andre?
Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me. Um, I My exposure to classical music started when I was a child. Around the age of 8 or 9 years old, I started taking piano lessons with a woman. I had a teacher. Her name was Dr. Joyce Carter, and I took piano lessons with her for about 5 years. Um, and I really enjoyed her as a teacher, but I did not enjoy playing classical music at a point. I got to a point where I was more interested in singing. I was more interested in songwriting, and I grew up in church, so I had this natural sort of attunement to gospel music, and I also enjoyed what I heard on the radio, so pop, R&B, and a little bit of jazz. So when I got to high school, I joined this choir. It was called HHW Vocal Arts Ensemble. Uh, that was in downtown Chicago. We would leave high school at about 12 to 12:30 p.m. and we would take there was a performing arts and visual arts building. So you would take your art related course there from 2 to 4 p.m. Uh, and there I was exposed to more classical art songs. And before I knew who he was, Moses Hogan, um, and people like that. But it wasn't until I got to Oberlin in Ohio, I was a musical studies major, and I was very intentional not to apply to the conservatory, uh, partially because I didn't really see the type of musician that I felt that I was. I didn't see that in the classical department or in the jazz department at Oberlin. So I was very intentional to uh, go the musical studies route and sort of have that freedom to explore further what it meant to be an artist outside of those two realms. And I credit uh, learning more about historical context about African American music to Dr. Federa Hadley, who was teaching at Oberlin, teaching ethnomusicology centered courses there while I was there. Um, so yeah, that's sort of my relationship to classical music.
So that I love Federa Hadley. She said Julia Gray goes that.
I think we may have lost poor Kennedy, who is doing her best to appear on both devices. I am just struck by the variety of the connections that you all have, and it seems like, even though you arrived to classical music from different perspectives, you know, we're all in it now. So it's wonderful. I'll just share briefly while Kennedy comes back that as a Latino growing up in Colombia originally, my home country, there was almost no division of what was music apart from classical music. I think music was just music. And I do remember seeing an orchestra when I was very young, and sort of pointing. Apparently I pointed to the violins and I said that I wanted to do that, and little did I know what I was getting myself into. But I think it's awesome to see that it seems like in all of our stories so far we have the connections of great teachers, right? Some mentor or some mentor figure who who kind of helped nurture that spark, and that's wonderful. I am not sure what other direction Kennedy wanted to take it into if she doesn't rejoin us soon.
Yeah,
But
I'm back.
there, perfect. Okay. Otherwise, I have the questions myself too. But go ahead, Kennedy. Thank you.
Yeah, so I was struck by this, Andre, you talking about how you wanted to carve out your own space, and how you did not see yourself represented within classical music in Oberlin. And this kind of resonates with, I feel like, how Florence Price had to pave her own way in the world of classical music. I'm wondering how, if any of you can speak to how you have felt that you've had to carve out a space for yourself in the classical music world. Starting with, I guess let's switch it up. Let's start with Dawn.
All right. Let's see. When I was in grad school, there weren't a lot of people that looked like me. Just even, women in my particular program. Uh, there was diversity, but not in terms of African American composers, African American women in particular. So let's see. I'm sorry. Could you ask your question again? I don't
Yes,
want to go down a rabbit hole.
I was just curious about how you felt that you may have had to carve.
Yes. So in my particular program, I would say it's a bit conservative at the time, meaning a particular style of composition was accepted. And if you didn't write in that way, you weren't really supported. I'm just kind of keeping it real. And at the time, this language was very intriguing to me. But after a while, I kind of felt like an alien. you know, I didn't want to. Honestly, I didn't want to hide my funk. I didn't want to hide my groove, even if it wasn't expressed in a funky way or a groovy way or whatever. But just things with rhythm and things with like a tonal melody. Um, I didn't feel that I felt like restricted. And so I actually left that world for several years until I came back to classical music through a really amazing program that was sponsored by the American Composers Orchestra. American Composers Orchestra. It's called the Jazz Composers Orchestra Institute, where jazz musicians of different backgrounds, like all over the world, got together, and we were able to write for the orchestra. And then I was selected to write a piece that was selected for a reading by the American Composers Orchestra. And that kind of sparked my spirit. And there was something that was said by one of the mentors, James Newton. He had said that when you compose, don't go at it trying to fit into a language. Write from your own experience. And it was sort of like, that was like the moment, angels singing and everything. I can just be me and write something instead of thinking, well, I have to write something that's orchestral, you know. So that, if that makes any sense, it was a freedom to get use this incredible into as a vehicle for as a vehicle for my personal expression instead of me trying to fit into what I think the orchestral tradition is.
Thank you so much. I guess I've faced similar issues to starting as a music education major and flute performance, and then not really seeing anyone that looks like me. And then not hearing the music that I grew up with. And then I found ethnomusicology, and that really kind of helped me find my space. But next, I would like to hear from Shenika.
Yeah, and this is a really great question you raised, Kennedy. I can also identify with Dawn. I attended a PWI, University of Michigan, for my undergrad. And very similarly, I was one of a few Black people in the room, Black women especially. And so what helped me was not only having great mentors. I studied with George Shirley, who was the first African-American tenor with the principal role at the Metropolitan Opera. Just a wealth of knowledge and wisdom that I was very, and still very grateful to have as a mentor, but also finding community, groups, organizations on campus that really helped in promoting, preserving, and supporting music created by African Americans or reflective of the African diaspora. One organization that comes to mind that I've been affiliated with since college is NAM, the National Association of Negro Musicians. And fun fact, Florence Price was a member of NAM, along with Margaret Bonds. It's a long-standing organization founded in 1919. It's been around as a catalyst of support for musicians of colors, among other organizations in this country. But I say this to say that having organizations and communities that really help and support was and is very, very helpful.
Thank you so much. Can I hear from Andre?
Yeah, sure. So once I got to Oberlin College, I think the last time I was in the environment of classical music was, I think, my freshman year. I did Oberlin College Choir, where pretty much all but 4 or maybe 5 of us out of a 45, 50 person choir were in the conservatory. Everyone was a conservatory classical voice singer, and there were like 4 or 5 of us who weren't. A dear friend of mine who ended up being a jazz voice major when the program was started at the college was also in that similar boat, and another friend of ours who was also a part of that HHW vocal arts choir was also there, but not in the conservatory. And we all shared similar feelings of feeling like an outsider, even though going through the process of being in this audition space, we had the ability to make it into the choir, but not having the credentials of being in the conservatory still put us in this displacement. So it resonates with me as well, even though I don't consider myself these days to be a practicing classical musician. That foundation is there, and I also recognize when fellow Black people that are in the classical department talk about that outsider notion. It feels like we have to work twice as hard just to get the sort of respect that is that seems to be assumed for our white counterparts that are in similar spaces. Um, so, but something about my classical background as a pianist, I think I approach a lot of the music that I make in a way that people may assume classical musicians do as well. So I might talk about something like dynamics or like counterpoint, using some of this maybe more so Eurocentric terminology that might not be used if I'm uh, playing with a band who grew up in the gospel tradition or something like that, where they are taught by ear, and it's something that's based more around feeling than it is theory. Um, so yes, and can you repeat some of the question too, just so I make sure I answer everything?
Basically, I believe the question I asked was, how have you had to carve out a space within? So I think you answered it pretty well.
Okay.
So thank you.
Hmm.
My next question, well, first, actually, I was reminded by all of you talking about kind of not seeing people that look like you, especially as Black women, to in these spaces. I was reminded that actually I didn't feel like an outsider until I got to college, because there was a Black flute teacher in the neighborhood who would give $20 flute lessons to all the Black girls. And like we all were in like district honor band together and stuff. And then I got to college and then I was the only one. And I was like, wow, this is what classical music looks like. I didn't know that. But anyway, so something to say about representation, I suppose. My next question, I'm getting to Florence Price. When did you all first encounter Florence Price, the composer, or just Black classical composers in general? I feel I had to be a sophomore in college before I was formally introduced to a Black composer. So I'm just curious about that with y'all. Can I start with Andre?
Yeah, sure. As far as Black composers in general, um, I believe the first time I heard a Black composer um, or performed some Black composers' music, to me, I think would be Moses Hogan in high school, performing some of those choral style pieces. And in terms of Florence Price specifically, I don't think I knew who she was before college, uh, before maybe my junior, maybe even senior year of college, because that's when I really started to take some of those classes that Garrett was teaching. So,
Don?
Let's see. I knew about Ollie Wilson. Um, I had actually had the pleasure of meeting him, um, and um, and I was familiar with his work a bit as somewhat as a composer, but like I had actually switched to ethnomusicology. So after finishing my master's in composition, I switched to ethnomusicology, and I studied Black music, specifically hip hop culture, underground hip hop culture, and so I was familiar with his scholarship too. So, um, and I really didn't get. I wasn't exposed to a lot of Black composers in my particular little planet, my my mini universe where I was studying. Like I said, there was some diversity, but Black composers, music by Black composers really wasn't celebrated all that much at the time. And the network, I mean, if we'd had, social media back then, at least I would know, be able to have conversations with other people and find out about, Florence Price um, so my exposure to uh, what's the growing canon is actually later in life, when I returned to classical music. So yeah.
Yeah, I can say I honestly did not know about Florence Price so my second year here, and it was because my dissertation chair, Alicia Lola Jones, brought her up. And I was like, where has she been all my life? Like, and it kind of felt like, I don't know, like I was grieving a little bit that I didn't get the chance to learn about this artist during college when I was like Shenika, can you speak about when you first encountered Florence or any other Black composers?
Sure. Well, for Florence Price, she writes a lot of beautiful art songs. So I was introduced to her through her art songs like Hold Fast to Dreams, Night, Songs of the Dark Version. And that happened for me in college. At the University of Michigan, like one of the earlier former deans of the University of Michigan was Willis Patterson. And he compiled an art song book called the Anthology of Art Songs by Black Composers, with a wealth of just wonderful music, art song by Black composers. And so that tradition was was pretty much steeped at University of Michigan when I attended, and we also had a class devoted to learning about the music of Black composers, and so at the time I was at the University of Michigan from 2012 to 2016, and so during that time period we were really trying to be as intentional in this learning, because as you talked about, Dawn and Andre, it can become very isolating when you don't see or hear music reflective of people that look like us. And so that effort was extremely prominent during that time. And that's how I was introduced to Florence Price.
Thank you so much. I'm also curious, going off of what you just said about how it can feel isolating to not play music by people, not only not see people in these spaces that look like you, but not play music by people that look like you. What did it feel like finally play music by someone who looks like you? Yeah, I'm curious about that feeling. I remember when I first discovered Valerie Coleman, who's a flutist and composer, that I was so happy. And like, I was like, I'm gonna play everything Imani Wynn's ever written. I'm gonna play everything she's ever written. I was her fangirl at like the National Flute Association. So I'm just curious, like, how did that feel for you guys to discover Florence Price, to discover Black composers? I'll start with Dawn.
Well, as I said, like just finding out that there are a number of people out there, and that I wasn't the only one, writing in this, and not that. The other thing is that there's a history. I mean, I knew that there was a history, but it was more of something I'd read than something I'd experienced. So there, I was aware of, like I remember doing a paper on Edward Margetson, I believe, and just I was really interested in Black composers at the turn of the 20th century, and how they were using their music as kind of in a way, protest the way they saw it. Of course, there was an elitism and all of that involved, but they saw themselves as race people, lifting up the race, and in the era of minstrelsy. so it was deep. But then that was sort of an academic way, and so I'm actually learning more about Black composers, just contemporary ones, and not so contemporary ones, and hopefully I'd like to just see to study the historical lineage. I think the world is a lot more connected now And so yeah, I think the world is a lot more connected, and a lot more opportunities to hear without others' cultural biases saying, oh, that's, kind of looking down on it.
Thank you. I suppose I'm trying to keep what's the order I've been going in. I've been trying to switch it up. I guess Shenika.
Yeah, just to add in terms of the performance of music by composers that look like me, it's liberating. In one word, liberation. It's for me, it's been a very fascinating experience. Similar to Andre, I grew up in the church, and so my background was in gospel music. We did some anthems as well, but particularly gospel praise and worship, that particular musical style was what I was accustomed to. And in learning and understanding that the music created by Black people is not monolithic, where it's only one particular genre of music, but we come with so many different shades and colors of styles and approaches. Knowing that and understanding that as a performer has been extremely liberating. Because when we think about it, from spiritual to blues to gospel to the earlier performers of opera. I'm thinking about Cissy Loretta Jones in the 1890s, to Marian Anderson. There's just so much out there. And I think that as lovers of arts and music, I would assume that we're all on this call because we have some interest in music and desire to learn and experience, that we could be open to just the variety that we have to offer as a people, as a culture. And so it's liberation. That's the word I would use to describe my feeling in terms of performance.
Thank you for that answer. I think just knowing the depth and the breadth of Black music has been I think that's what drew me to ethnomusicology, to explore that. Because I got tired of defending that in undergrad. I was like, no, what can bring me to certain ideas where Black music is celebrated? So thank you for your answer. Andre, can I hear your response?
I'm just going to be echoing what Don and Shenika said, because the first two words that came to mind was historical context and connection. For me, the connectivity of being able to perform musics that has lived beyond the years that I've been on this earth, and that has been composed, and that we're almost fighting similar fights, something that is a through line that we've been learning about here at IU has been the concept of like survivalism in the text and in the music. And when you have Black composers, whether it's blatantly stated or if it's masked behind a gospel song or a Negro spiritual, that concept of keeping to move forward not only speaks to the aspects of survivalism that Black people sing with and play their musics with and play their instrumentations with, it also speaks to just how connected we are ancestrally. So when I sing that music, it feels that sort of connectivity. It feels like something that I can connect to a little bit better than I could when I was playing the piano and I was playing like a piece by Beethoven or a piece by Bach or something that it was harder for me to feel that connection, even though some of the environments that you would play that music in, it sort of felt like the expectation. So I'm very grateful that Shenika brought up the aspect of liberation, feeling liberated in the music, feeling free in the music. But also to the point of historical context. Oh my God, like I just started this program in August. So I have been familiar with certain things, but I'm glad, Kennedy, that you brought up Dr. Jones, Dr. Alicia Jones as well, because she wrote a piece that was on Florence Price and Marian Anderson and the performance that she did at the Washington Monument Memorial, and being the first Black woman to sing there. She was singing a classical piece. It was written by Florence Price, and that performance sort of happened out of a rejection from the Daughters of American Revolution not wanting her to perform at this other place. So reading that piece sort of made me think like, oh wow, like there's a lot of historical context behind this work, behind this music, and part of the reasons why I'm here studying ethnomusicology was because I wanted to have the arsenal to be able to defend why this music is important, why this work is important, why Black musicians are due more credit, are due reparations, are due things musically. A lot of things have been like stolen and taken away from us, or we haven't been given the opportunity to do specific things just because of living in a society that is built on capitalism and built on the backs or the work of African American people without giving them credit. So that has always been important to me. So that's why I'm here.
Thank you, Andre. What you just said, and then something Dr. Marquise Cotter brought up in their talk. When was that? Ooh, days are flying by. Last week sometime. But he was talking about how it's important for him and important for us as musicians, as artists, to risk placing Eurocentric, a white supremacist gaze upon Black music and Black music research. I'm curious to know how you all resist that in your own work, or how you have felt other people resist that, or resist the call to resist white supremacy in Black music research, if that makes sense. Anyone can speak on that if they want to. I want popcorn. Because, okay, I'll keep speaking. Because what I have heard when we are playing Florence Price, or when I hear people talk about Florence Price, there's always this tendency to compare, right? To compare to Dvorak, to compare to Gershwin, and not think of her as a composer in her own right. It's always within the lens of white supremacy, of whiteness, of Eurocentricity. So I'm just wondering, how do you all resist a Eurocentric gaze upon Black music? I'll call on Andre.
I'm glad, because I was just about to go on mute. For me, just having that reminder in my mind that the work if it's inspiring to white people, I guess that's fine, that's cool. But the work that I do is not meant for them. And just being reminded of like, who is your audience? Thinking about who is your intended audience with the research that you do and the work that you want to do. For me, I'm interested in Black audiences sort of having conversations that they aren't accustomed to having, and just talking a little bit more about just having more conversations with people who I grew up with, people who I care about the opinion and the perspectives that they have, to emphasize the purpose of being able to be exposed to new ways of thinking. So for me, as of right now in my journey, my work, I want to make sure that Black communities and Black perspectives are always welcomed, and that doesn't necessarily prioritize white folks. Yeah, and I think someone who just to bring up Dr. Jones again, she wrote a book, Flaming, Theopolitics of Higher Desire, Black Male Gospel Performance. And she's talked a little bit about how this is for people like her mom. This is for people like her community. This isn't necessarily for the white gaze, even though the white gaze might take interest in it because they may or may not have seen it before. It's not necessarily meant to be for them. Hey, Nia, I see you in the chat. And hey, Yumko, I see you too.
Thank you, Andre. I also just put Dr. Jones's book in the chat. Really important work she's doing there with thinking about queer identities and gospel music scenes. Don, would you like to respond to that? You also don't have to. We can also open it up to everyone else to ask questions to our group of panelists.
Okay. Well, I guess I have, my perspective is, I spent quite a few, I guess of my early years as a composer, feeling the pressure of gaze. And when I returned to classical music, quote unquote, whatever you want to call it, I felt like I have a voice and I'm going to use it. And some things might sound more traditionally classical, and then you hear the quotes every time I use that term. And some may sound less classical, but I feel that my best contribution is when I'm free as a musician to create however the heck I want to create, regardless of the gaze. I don't want this big white guy sitting on my head. You know, when I compose, I want to, you know, the way I can best fight the cult and culture of white supremacy is being the best of my authentic self and expressing that, learning that and expressing that.
Thank you so much for your answer. I've also, I feel when I was in music school, I really was, the weight of the gaze is so heavy, I think, and all encompassing sometimes. And I do feel most free when I'm able to do what I want to do. Liberation, I guess, is the key word of the night or evening. Shenika, do you want to answer? And then we'll open it up to everyone else.
Sure. And just to add to what was already said so wonderfully, there is something to be said about understanding and being grounded in self-worth and value. We are valuable. The contributions that we put forth, whether we're artists or we're looking at the work of these amazing composers, are valuable, period. That's something that is something that is important to be said, because when comparison seeps in, when we're comparing the music of Florence Price to a white counterpoint, that's dangerous. It's dangerous because what we're doing is we're essentially othering this music, this valuable music that deserves to be performed regularly and be a part of this American canon. Period. That's something that really needs to be said. And then as we think about aesthetics in terms of music, I am reminded of a lecture that I've been attending and have the privilege of attending, being the road manager of the African American choral ensemble, directed by Dr. Raymond Wise. He gives wonderful lectures on Black music, and one of the things that he's really talked about that really stands out to me is just the aesthetic, the African aesthetic versus the European aesthetic. So for African aesthetic, we're talking about creating music for collective art. European aesthetic, individual art. African aesthetic, pentatonic scales. European aesthetic, diatonic scales. Oral tradition. I know Andre you mentioned a little bit before for the African aesthetic. Oral tradition, learning by ear, and improvisation versus European aesthetic, written tradition, with a sense of structure, constant. These things are very important to think about when we talk about white gaze, because if we're looking at a piece of music through a particular lens, we will formulate opinions based on the gaze that we're looking at the music through. And so, for example, if you go into a traditional Black gospel church, with looking at the music and the experience through the white gaze, it'll scare you. You might be it might be shell shocking because of the lean towards the African aesthetic. And so just thinking about that and being true to that, and being real with ourselves in terms of how are we approaching music? Are we approaching music with a sense of openness to what it has to offer in its essence, in its truthful essence? Or are we trying to manipulate and control to fit into a particular box that it might not belong in? That is something that we should definitely take into consideration when we talk about music in general, and when we look into music reflective of the African diaspora and even European music.
Can I add something to Shanika's point really quickly? You said
Thank
something
you.
that
Wow.
really.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
I love what you said when you talked about someone going to a traditional like Black church, and they're unfamiliar with the sort of aesthetic and being scared or being afraid. That really reminded me of when colonizers, when settlers, when colonialists would go to either places of worship in Africa, or if they would go to Black churches in the 1700s, 1800s, a lot of that text, a lot of that reading uses words like primitive, savagery, or even demonic. And that sort of through line, if we trace that sort of same feeling to today, it arguably could be what you're talking about now, being scared, being afraid, because you don't really understand the historical social context of where that comes from, and how those Africanisms exist for Black people. So when you said that, it just reminded me of that, and I just wanted to throw that out there as well. Thank you.
Well, yeah, I was also thinking about if you're familiar with the text slave songs of the United States, and how they transcribe the Negro spirituals were just, they transcribed it in a Eurocentric way, in a flattening way. And we still do that, I feel, and how but I feel like in musical communities and how we teach Black music and how we expect it to sound, we're always approaching it with a Eurocentric ear. And I agree, Shenika, it's something that needs to be addressed. And that, and what Wise is saying is absolutely correct, right? That there is this Eurocentric aesthetic, but there's also an African-derived aesthetic that should be honored and celebrated as well. So now I'm going to open it up to y'all, and by y'all I mean people in the virtual audience. First of all, I just want to also thank our panelists for giving like an amazing answers to my questions, and also dealing with my spotty Wi-Fi here in Ohio. I don't know if you could see the corn behind me, but yep, we're deep in here. So any questions from the panel, or not the panelists, from the audience? Or do the panelists have questions for each other? Oh, okay.
I'll just ask. I mean, first of all, it's been humbling and enlightening and wonderful to hear the variety of candor and experiences that you're all sharing. Thank you so much. We're the better and the richer for it. I just wanted to just kind of an open-ended question about what are some of these ways that you are taking all of these issues into your own work and into your current lives, and at the risk of, you know, each of us as listeners and as practitioners of music have to figure out what we need to do to be better advocates. So I'm not asking you to tell us necessarily what to do, but if there is any kind of call to action that you put in your own lives that you could then share with the rest of us, I think we would appreciate it. And I don't know, anyone who wants to answer, you can just fight about it. Maybe Dr. Dawn there. Okay, Dawn.
Yes. Well, I am heartened to hear that my fellow composers here had mentors. I didn't have that. You know, I didn't have that until probably right after I finished my doctorate. And yeah, so like I said, I kind of had I kind of had a feeling of just not really being 100% a part of something. So I also understand and appreciate the value of mentorship, because the mentors already went through some of the things that, you know, other people are about to go through, so they can warn them, they can prep them, and um, also just serve as a you know, sounding board for ideas. What do you think? And they're people I have as mentors now. So for that reason, I am trying to be a mentor for other people you know, coming up. And I, um, like right now, I'm a mentor with this wonderful program for young girls and non-binary people, and it's called Luna Composition Labs. And so um, it's really amazing, because this is for people from like ages 12 to 18, you know. And I thought, wow, I started writing songs when I was 15. What would my life have been like if I had had a mentor, just somebody who just would say that, okay, these songs that you're doing, that's incredible. Because I was writing songs and I was composing, I was, you know, and performing, but I actually needed somebody to say that I was special, you know. And I think that's what a mentor does. And so what I'm doing in my own life to make some positive changes, to be there as a mentor. Like there's a program called ACTSO. It stands for Afro Academic, Cultural, Technological, and Scientific Olympics. And it's a part of the NAACP, you know, organization. And I've been a mentor with a local chapter for, I think this is my 12th year. Just, you know, talking musicians to young musicians, high school musicians, and letting them know they are special. You know, I think we do need to know that we are special. And the earlier they get that message, the better. Because I think sometimes half the battle and going into a college environment is finding out that there's this thing that they now call imposter syndrome. Like, I don't belong here, I'm not good enough, and blah, blah, blah. I think having a mentor can, to instill that sense of confidence, can help people get through that battle.
I can quickly jump in. Thank you, Dawn, for that's great. And fun fact, I was actually a national AXO winner. And so love AXO, I love NAACP. They do a really amazing things. So really great. Being at IU has been awesome and amazing, especially being a part of AAAI, the African American Arts Institute, and serving as a road manager for the African American Choral Ensemble. And just a fun fact, fun plug, we actually have our potpourri performance coming up November 14th, which is a combination of all of the ensembles, the African American Dance Company, IU Soul Review, and the African American Choral Ensemble. And so just being a part of that community has been really, really amazing, because I started my studies at IU through the Jacobs School of Music. So it's not directly connected or directly linked to AAAI, other than through some musical aspects, and the Neil Marshall Black Culture Center. But having that sense of community here has been amazing. And so that's been one of the ways that I've been really involved in the learning and the understanding of music reflective of the African diaspora and African American music in general. Resources that I would quickly share: reading. There are some awesome books that I would definitely point people to, some of which include musical scores. I mentioned earlier the anthology of art songs by Black composers by Willis Patterson. There's also an art song and spirituals by African American women composers. There's a compilation book by Vivian Taylor. NAM as an organization that I recommended as well. The Sphinx organization, very new too. Even reference books like the International Dictionary of Black Composers by Samuel A. Floyd Jr. Or if you're interested in Florence Price, The Heart of a Woman, The Life and Music of Florence Price by Ray Linda Brown. There's so many things out there. And I would say too many to name at this point in this small hour that we have to chat. But I say just take for us as people, just take a moment. And we are great. It's so awesome that we have technology where we can look things up, or seek out some of the resources that we're interested in, and be a part of these kinds of conversations where we can hear people's experiences, and talk to professors like Dr. John, talk to people who are on that journey like myself and Andre, and go from there, continuing the conversation. That's something that I certainly recommend in my experience.
Yeah, shout out to everything that you mentioned, especially some of the folks that are writing this scholarship. You mentioned reading, and it got me thinking a lot about how sometimes people don't read because they don't even know what to look for. And coming here, names like Samuel Floyd weren't that familiar to me, but since I've been here, it's all I've been immersed in. But simultaneously, like at the same time, it's also because everyone around me is doing that reading, is doing that text. When I go home, it's our responsibility sometimes to disseminate that information out to others. So things like he was editing for the Black Music Research Journal for I think about 2 decades. He was doing that. That was at the Center for Black Music Research at Columbia College in Chicago, and that was something I didn't know that journal was there. Well, I heard of the journal before, but I didn't even know it was there until I got here. But things like that have just loads of information on Black music research, and it's critical analyses too of whatever their subject matter is for that time period. So that Black perspectives in music, with I think Eileen Southern, one of our first like credited Black ethnomusicologists that we have. Folks like Portia Maltsby too. Also, shout out to Potpourri too. I do want to say thank you for shouting out Potpourri. I'm a part of IU Soul Review as well. I'm singing and playing keys in that group. And we're having that show. I think it's sometime in November. So definitely come out, come through. I don't know if it'll be live streamed, but if it's live streamed, please check that out as well. It is a part of Triple AI. That's African American Choral Ensemble, us with Soul Review, and the African American Dance Ensemble as well. So yeah, but there's just all that to say. There's loads of information that you can find on Black music research, Black folks that have been telling our narratives and telling our perspectives on how we've been treated, and also just not only being aware of it, but once you are aware that something is new, how do you contribute to future conversations when you see that something like that a problem has that arises? Black people cannot be in every room all the time. Queer folks cannot be in the rooms all the time. Disabled folks cannot always be in the room every time. So, as someone who wants to be an advocate for someone or wants to be some sort of help in way, shape, or form, I think what's important to note is how you respond to injustice when that person cannot speak up for themselves. I think sometimes is more important than how you respond when they're there, because that response can be read as more performative than the response when they aren't in the room. So I think always being mindful of that is just as important as knowing the information. Thank you.
All right. Well, it looks like we're at time, but I really wanted to give you guys a round of applause virtually for this talk. I thought it was really enlightening. I'm excited. Y'all are really smart. I hope y'all know that. Any more questions before we officially close out? Or should I hand it to you, Alejandro? I'm not sure what I should do.
No, I'll just maybe do a little bit of a wrap up here, but yes, here, absolutely what Kennedy just said. Thank you also to Kennedy so much for taking the time to help organize this and guide the discussion so thoughtfully. I mean, this is not easy, and of course we don't even begin to pretend that during 1 hour of a panel like this are we addressing all the things that need to be addressed, but we were happy to begin to provide a forum, and I have to say I'm proud of the support of the musicians of the Bloomington Symphony and everything who have not only enthusiastically endorsed the idea that we do this, not only the panels but the concert. You know, we've been talking about doing this as far back as late 2018, 2019, and it's great that the date to finally do this Indiana premiere, Florence Price, tomorrow is here, tomorrow at 5 p.m. And I have to say that's kind of the same process that as a conductor has motivated me to help champion these works, not only of Black composers, but just underrepresented composers in general, living composers, women. That is how I found Dawn, actually, that she referenced earlier, and I was just looking for, you know, who is somebody who is doing stuff that is like themselves, you know, like her in this case. And that's how we found this piece by Dawn called Seed that BSO performed. And I think basically the last thing I'll say is it is very important to me as ambassador of Bloomington and Bloomington Symphony that this not be a one-off. And I think having the panel, not just today, but having the discussion with Marquise Carter and the expansion to the art songs is a great beginning. I've also been lucky to meet Dr. Tyrone Cooper of the Archives of African American Music, and there's going to be a partnership that's already a partnership that's starting with this concert, and hopefully we'll take it out into more years into the future, and also just not only through music but research. And this panel itself, I mean, will still be on our site, and I would love to, after we're done for today, just get you, Shenika, Andrea, and Don to give us some more of those links that you cited, some of these books, some of these resources, because we have a page on the website, BSO, where we're just kind of calling it Dig Deeper. And we're going to have some playlists, and it would be great if we have kind of a little repository that grows with information that speaks to some of the issues that we have addressed. So anyway, I'm just beyond excited. I know that thanks to you, the concert is going to be that much more meaningful tomorrow, because of course, with more context, with more learning, with more understanding, everything is going to be that much more true and that much more sincere. And thank you all so much. Quite humbling and humbled, and we just really appreciate your time and your support and your candor through all of this. So I appreciate it, and I think with that we can probably say until we meet again for now. And hopefully some of you who are watching will see you at the concert tomorrow. Dawn, a pleasure to see you. Hopefully our paths, I know they will cross. I'll put a video of one of your latest collaborations with another great composer, Clarissa Sad, on the chat. Check it out, Vapayu, and it's great. That shows kind of what Dawn's idioms and musical idioms are. And Clarissa Sad is another powerhouse herself out of Brazil. And so many wonderful people doing things. So I'll be quiet for now, because this is just, you know, I can't be quiet, but I'll try to be quiet now. And thank you everybody so much again for just being part of this. You make us all the better for it. So thank you. Have a great afternoon, evening, wherever you are, and happy concert tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.